I believe that a large-scale resettlement of the world population is increasingly necessary to compensate for the dangerous misalignment in our foundational geographies. There are 4 layers of geography that underpin human civilization, and today they are badly out of sync. The first is natural geography. This is the geography and location and distribution of our resources. On maps such as this, brown represents the deserts, blue represents the oceans, green represents the forests, and so forth. But this layer of geography is very much in flux due to the acceleration of climate change. Industrial agriculture and deforestation are reducing the volume and the expanse of the green. Drought and desertification are expanding the brown. Greenhouse gas emissions are turning our air black, drying up our rivers and polluting our oceans. As temperatures rise, our glaciers melt. Future maps will have less white over the Andes, the Rockies, the Alps, the Himalayas, and of course, the polar ice caps as well. And as sea levels rise, they encroach upon and inundate our coastlines. So future maps will therefore also have more blue. The second layer is the political geography of states and borders. This is the most arbitrary of our cartographic lenses. In 1945, the United Nations had only 51 members. Today, it has nearly 200 members. That's the result of post-World War II decolonization, after which more than 100 new countries were born, and of course the collapse of the Soviet Union 30 years ago. There have never been as many sovereign states, in fact, as we have today. The third layer of geography is the functional infrastructure that we have built. These are the intentional investments that we have been making to connect us to each other. These lines represent the highways and the railways, the electricity grids and the oil and gas pipelines, the seaports and airports, the fiber optic internet cables that have blanketed much of the world. All of our supply chains, much of the global economy, and quite frankly, our civilization as we know it, has come to depend on this connectivity. And here's the map that you see least of all. This is the map of us. This is our human geography. It's our distribution across the planet. Every one of us, 8 billion pixels. And of course, where we are is no accident. After millennia of nomadism, the retreat of the Ice Age more than 10,000 years ago enabled humankind to settle into more sedentary agricultural and pastoral rhythms. We did so primarily where the climate was amenable, the so-called climate niche, with much of the world population clustering between 20 and 30 degrees north latitude. And within those latitudes, we planted roots as close as possible to rivers and estuaries. Environmental factors such as droughts and floods, political phenomena such as wars and genocides, and technological advancements such as air conditioning and the internet have all played a role in shaping our human geography. The grand story of our geographic evolution can't be told through only one cartographic lens. Rather, we can only fully appreciate the chain reactions among and the misalignments between these layers of geography by superimposing them on top of each other, generating an image as messy and as complex as it is accurate and revealing. And what such a layering unveils to us is the misalignment among the geography of resources, borders, economics, and people. Resources are abundant where people are few, and resources are scarce where populations are dense. Billions of people are trapped behind borders in increasingly uninhabitable places, while increasingly livable geographies are actually becoming depopulated. Correcting the imbalances among and steering our system towards a more dynamic equilibrium should become our common civilizational mission. It's no longer an overstatement to say that our fundamental survival depends on rectifying these misalignments. That's because we can no longer take global population growth for granted. Instead, the human population will soon taper, plateau, and eventually decline much sooner than we thought it would. Today's youth, Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, together represent 60% of the human population. But as our children defer from having children, or have fewer children, or none at all, each generational cohort is getting smaller and smaller. And that means that the present generation that dominates the world today is also going to dominate the future. To put it in sci-fi terms, the present is the future. So now we've established our nomadic origins, our geographic misalignments, and our demographic plateau. We may reach 9 billion people on a planet where most people live in uninhabitable places. So where do we go from here? To say that humanity is at a crossroads would be something of an understatement. The scenarios that we can conjure up range from mass extinction to a harmonious relationship with nature. In Move, I developed 4 scenarios for the future. And for the purposes of this book, I constructed these scenarios along the axes of sustainability and migration. We'll start with the 2 low sustainability scenarios. The new Middle Ages harkens back to the Eurasian world of 1,000 years ago. It was a fragmented world of local survivalism and limited trade, a world of moats and tactical alliances. To map it onto the present, it suggests a scenario in which technological innovation to forestall climate change and technology transfer to promote sustainability elsewhere are totally and utterly insufficient. Furthermore, migration to livable geographies is strictly limited. The other low sustainability scenario is called barbarians at the gate. The Romans used this expression in a very literal sense as they fortified their settlements in the early centuries AD before their collapse. Here we also bring in the geopolitical dimension of water wars and land grabs, but also mass migrations as refugees overwhelm borders. It's a similarly chaotic scenario, but a more globalized one due to international conflict and political or climate refugee flows. Now we have the somewhat more positive scenarios. Regional fortresses is in many ways a continuation of the present. It's a world of regional strongholds like North America, Europe, Russia, Japan, that primarily invest in their own sustainability and self-sufficiency of agriculture, energy, and industry. They rein in supply chains through nearshoring. They engage in some degree of technology transfer to support developing regions towards similar ends. But they continue to ward off large-scale migration, even violently if needed. Less globalization may make them feel more secure, but it doesn't make them wealthier, given their aging demographics and their smaller markets. The fourth and final scenario is called Northern Lights. It's the most optimistic, ambitious, and progressive scenario. But what would it take to get there? The pathway to Northern Lights calls for a resettled human population, mostly around geographies of the Northern Hemisphere. But it also suggests a fluid circulation of people, either seasonally or to cope with various kinds of unpredictability, whether political or ecological. In this scenario, we also pre-design our habitats to be more circular in the usage and recycling of water, production of energy through renewable resources, and other means. Today, elements of all four of these scenarios are visible, either within certain regions and, of course, at the global scale, to a greater or lesser degree. And if constructed properly, the future will, in fact, embody all of these scenarios. The only question is where and to what extent.